Hi and hello from Boston, Massachusetts. Oliver Freudenreich or Dr. F here for the Psychopharmacology Institute. In this quick take, I'm going to talk about a study that shows you the power of epidemiology and long-term follow-up in medicine. In this case, the study in question re-examines the long-term agranulocytosis risk from clozapine, and I think it is very close to being a definitive study. Therefore, any clinician who treats patients with serious mental illness should know this paper from Rubio and colleagues, which was just published online at the end of April 2024 in Lancet Psychiatry. It provides real data that you can use to form your own judgments and to create your own talking points when you discuss the potential clozapine trial with your patients, specifically with regards to the risk of agranulocytosis. First, however, I want to give you some background. This population-based epidemiological study comes from a well-known Finnish-Swedish group of researchers, particularly the doctors Taipale and Tiihonen, sorry about the pronunciation, which I guessed, who have taken advantage of the natural registries from the country of Finland to examine morbidity and mortality in the Finnish population, particularly with regards to serious mental illness. They are in a unique position to do high-quality epidemiological research because the various registries in Finland, like the medical registry, pharmacy data, or the death registry, are well maintained and they go back over a long period of time. Finland is also the country with the highest rate of clozapine use, so they are uniquely positioned to study rare events in the real world. Just as an aside, in my opinion, one of the main contributions to psychiatry from this research group was their finding in the so-called FIN20 study that the highest long-term all-cause mortality risk for patients with schizophrenia in Finland is in that group of patients who were untreated compared to patients who were treated with antipsychotics, including clozapine. Now, importantly, the long-term cumulative mortality risk was lowest for patients treated with clozapine, suggesting that the clinical benefits of using clozapine reduces mortality compared to other antipsychotics and certainly compared to no treatment, despite some possible risks from using clozapine. Now to the study. This group of researchers used, again, the entire Finnish population for this population-based study. They first identified all patients who were diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder between 1972 and 2014, and who were either treated with clozapine or another antipsychotic. And then they also looked for cases of new agranulocytosis over a 20-year observation period, which they gave as 1996 to 2017. They found a total of about 62,000 people diagnosed with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. And of those, about 14,000 were treated with clozapine and about 48,000 treated with non-clozapine antipsychotics. On average, patients were 74 years old. Now, in this cohort, 398 individuals, almost 400, were diagnosed with agranulocytosis over the 22 years follow-up. And this breaks down for you to have some absolute numbers. So 231 individuals treated with clozapine and 167 individuals treated with non-clozapine antipsychotics, representing, if you do the math, a cumulative incidence of agranulocytosis of 1.37% for clozapine patients and 0.13% for non-clozapine antipsychotic patients. So there's clearly a higher risk for developing agranulocytosis when you take clozapine compared to non-clozapine antipsychotics. Let me give you one more number. The agranulocytosis case fatality rate was 2.81 per 10,000 individuals exposed to clozapine and 0.63 per 10,000 individuals exposed to non-clozapine antipsychotics. So there's clearly a higher risk of dying from agranulocytosis when you take clozapine compared to non-clozapine antipsychotics. So imagine one of those typical survival curves from medical school in your mind. You would see very nicely that the long-term agranulocytosis risk is different for clozapine and non-clozapine patients. And this is the main point. Those patients on clozapine developed agranulocytosis at a higher rate compared to non-clozapine treated patients, And while the curve for non-clozapine treated patients basically stays flat over the many years of follow-up, the clozapine agranulocytosis curve continues to creep up, suggesting that over time, new cases of agranulocytosis develop in the clozapine group, even after the initial period of highest risk that is well known and well established in literature, even if this initial period abates. More than half of the agranulocytosis events in patients treated with clozapine occurred during the initial 6 months, and the rest over the remaining follow-up period of, as I said, up to 22 years. This is interesting and suggests two different mechanisms for clozapine-induced agranulocytosis, one being a more acute immune-mediated mechanism, and one a more chronic, perhaps toxic mechanism. In addition, the authors saw that there were two periods of declining risk with regards to developing clozapine agranulocytosis. One after the initial period of risk between 6 and 12 months, and then another second risk reduction after a period of about 3 years. The other antipsychotics had an initial period of some risk, but that became negligible in long-term follow-up. Where does this leave you when you discuss clozapine with your patients? Obviously, you need to discuss the agranulocytosis risk, but you can also point out that the absolute risk is low and manageable with monitoring. Importantly, people must take into account the much higher risk of dying when a serious mental illness goes untreated or is poorly treated. Clozapine can be life-saving. Unfortunately, I will add, while some patients might find the new information from this study reassuring, other patients may find the persistence of risk in particular concerning. So ongoing discussion may be needed to get the reluctant people aboard for a clozapine trial. Let me add one final word for listeners from the United States. There have been recent advocacy efforts to have the FDA relax the very stringent clozapine monitoring requirements, which is mandatory monthly absolute neutrophil count monitoring after 1 year of more frequent monitoring for as long as a patient stays on clozapine. The FDA notes on their website that they are looking into this issue of the need for long-term monitoring, apparently conducting 2 studies of their own, so there definitely is some movement. I'm not sure how this study will help or not, as the basic risk-benefit evaluation is a value judgment, and I can see that a very conservative view of this study would argue for not changing anything, given the persistence of agranulocytosis risk with clozapine. I hope that this is not going to be the case, as it poses an obstacle to better clozapine utilization in the United States. So stay tuned for more action on the regulatory side in the near future, at least in my country here, the United States. Thank you for listening to this quick take today. Take care.